Darcy McBride hanging out at GM Place with Mike Goldberg for MMAsucka.com. How you doing today, Mike?
Good, Darcy. Nice to finally meet you in person.
No, man, that's cool.
I like the black shirt too. I kind of like that look.
Kind of looking. It's a slim.
Maybe
look,
go with it's a slim. Maybe go with a black sport coat. It's kind of catchy.
Just an idea, right?
Yeah, just an idea.
So as you know, first time in Vancouver, the sport's sanctioned finally in BC for the time being. What's the biggest thing about the UFC coming to an untapped market?
Well, I think it's the unbridled enthusiasm. I mean, that's the big thing about coming to the new market is that fans who haven't had the opportunity to travel somewhere else to see the UFC have an opportunity to see the UFC in their backyard. And that, to me, at the end of the day, is what it's all about. And every new market that we've gone in the last few years, it's been off the charts. The reaction before, during, and after, the interviews before, the excitement during, the fighters, the autograph sessions, everything about the UFC
comes with it.
Yeah, it comes with it, excites new fans or old fans when we go to a new city. And I expect this to be very similar to some of the great atmospheres we've had, not just in Canada, but all around the world.
Totally. Switch gears just a little, as we spoke about before. You got a lot of ties to the area. You used to do pay-per-view Canuck games in this building, if I'm not mistaken. And your wife Kim is also from here, so it's kind of sweet to come back to the Van City area.
I was just with Mike Hall, who's still in the broadcast department many years later, here in the building, and I was reminded of this story, Darcy, which is crazy. It gave me chills. The first ever UFC I did was in December of 1997. It was in Japan. I flew back from Japan, stayed at Georgian Court, and did a Canucks pay-per-view game the next night.
No way.
That was my first Canucks game on pay-per-view. So not only did they come at a similar time, I forgot. They literally came one on top of another. And I remember thinking about jet lag, but when you flew back, the time was on your side, and so I slept all day.
Right?
It was crazy. It was crazy. But that's how closely tied and intermixed my time here in Vancouver still exists, because we summer in British Columbia at Christina Lake. But my time in meeting Kim and when I started the UFC, it's truly a homecoming for me, and I'm pretty overwhelmed with the enthusiasm that comes.
That's cool, man. So guys like Rory McDonald obviously putting Canadian MMA on the map. UFC Canada opens in Toronto. Canada and MMA is starting to become kind of synonymous, right?
Well, you know what? I've always said, Darce, that the sport was saved by the Canadian fan. When we were going through the problems we went through in the States as far as, the satellite distribution and then the cable distribution of, pay-per-views prior to the Zuffa ownership, the reason we stayed afloat was because of the loyal Canadian fan who bought the pay-per-view. I have no doubt that Canadian fans saved the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Wow. So to be able to come back and come here and have successful events in Montreal, now Vancouver, next TO, and then all around every province, I think that the Canadian fan has earned it. And they were there during the dark days. They were believers. They're loyal. They're devoted. They're enthusiastic, and they're as good as any fan in the world.
Now we talked about what the future's going to be like. You mentioned it as the dark days, but being first person next to that octagon, it must not have been those dark days. What were the early days like to see the sport rise from nothing?
They were different. It was a spectacle. I was trying to learn. There's no question I was trying to learn what was going on, and the shows were on a much smaller scale. Certainly we didn't have the whole graphics package and 20,000 people, and maybe we had 2,000, and a lot of those seats were given away. But you know what? The true competition, though, and the true warrior spirit of the fighters has always been. They're better athletes now. They're more well-rounded. They're more versed in all the disciplines. But the fact of the matter, so is every athlete in every sport. The hockey player in the mid-90s is different than the hockey player in 2010.
Just evolution
it's
itself.
Evolution, yes. Which, of course, our sport has evolved in different ways as well. But you know what? Every professional sport, every game has evolved. Every single game and sport has evolved. And so that's the big difference. But I'll tell you, the warrior spirit, the level of competition and the devotion and the courage of our athletes, that's the one thing I'll tell you. Sitting in that seat for many, many years, that has never changed, and I don't anticipate it ever will.
No kidding. Business-wise, what's the biggest change that UFC has made to make MMA, the longevity of the sport, solid?
Regulation, regulation and marketing, but with the marketing came the proper regulation, because we had a product in which we could market that was finally regulated in the right fashion. So, what was one of the greatest hires in Zuffa UFC history? Mark Ratner. Having Mark Ratner, who handled Nevada for so many years, understands the regulatory bodies. He knows the business. Right? And so we structured ourselves a much more mainstream, regulated, and understandable sport, Darce, but then we marketed it properly. We had a great product to market, and so I would say that's the big thing. Our marketing is as good as any in any sport. There's no question about it. Our fighters are accessible. Our president's accessible. So if you're Superstar Joe, how do you walk by one of your fans when you got your boss standing there signing 50 autographs? It doesn't happen. So, but the regulation had to come first because the product to be marketed had to be the proper one.
One final question. We're standing in a building that you were in a few months ago. How did it feel to watch our Canadian boys take that gold medal? You're probably sitting next to your wife, Kim, sitting in Canada. You took her, man. Sidney Crosby buried
it. Chills. Yeah, maybe a little better goal than the one, against Michael Layton. It's
some
been
weird
a long
similarities, though, right?
They're very weird similarities. Very weird similarities. I will admit that I was here during the semis. I was home in my living room because my son had a game that same day, so I was home for the gold medal game. But I sat about right there, honestly. I sat right here for Canada, Russia. And when those two teams came on the ice with those players, it was unlike, other than a UFC, it was unlike anything I've ever seen before. Yeah, you know what? It was like that, though. And for me to be there with my 10-year-old son who plays the game, who loves the game, and understand what it meant, and I mean, when I was 10 years old.
Understand what it means for another 10, 15 years.
Right,
they'll be like, wow, I was there with my dad in the stadium.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
I played in a tournament when I was 10 years old here. I played in a tournament. Yeah, I was the first, I was on the first American team to ever play in this tournament in BC. And
we got lots of cheers.
Yeah, we got beat up pretty good, too.
Want to thank you a ton for getting together with me today, Mike. Awesome, man. Really appreciate it. Gonna have a hell of a time at UFC 115 this weekend. Hope you have a great time in Vancouver. Darcy McBride for Radio TKO on MMAsucka.com.